Yes, 2025 is here, but we're still rounding up some of the best games from 2024, both critically, commercially, mainstream, whatever. Today, specifically, we're rounding up the best 2024 games on PlayStation 5. We got 30 games. It was hard to include everything, so if we missed something, let us know. So let's go get started off with number 30. Alien Rogue Incursion is a PSVR 2 title. I know like we're cheating a little bit, but it still counts as a game in my book. We like VR a lot here, even if we don't have the chance to cover it enough. But essentially, this is a solid Alien experience. It's definitely for Alien fans. It's got some interesting stuff going on. It's got the atmosphere, it's got the weapons, it's got the items, it's got a character from the Dark Horse comics. And while ultimately it is a little bit more complicated than it just being Alien Isolation in VR, there's more to it than that. It is worth checking out. Next, over at number 29, we have Rise of the Ronin. This is the open world samurai action game from Team Ninja, the people behind Neo, and a lot of highly complicated, very interesting action games. And Rise of the Ronin just feels a little bit different. It's a little bit more accessible. It's got a really good character creator and just lots to do in this crazy open world. The graphics aren't the best, but it is fun. The combat, the gore, all that is absolutely awesome. Next, over at number 28, we have one of the biggest ones of the year, Black Myth Wukong. This game absolutely kicks ass. I know some people were like debating whether or not it should be game of the year. Doesn't really matter either way, in my opinion. What does matter is that you should play it. It's got a pretty unique setting, interesting characters, really incredible boss designs, and just like a steady flow of them. Black Myth Wukong is definitely one of the more unique games on PS5 this year. Next, over at number 27, we have Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Yes, that's right, Dragon Ball fans finally got everything they wanted with this one. I think, some of the single player content leaves a little bit to be desired, but this Dragon Ball brawler in the classic style is absolutely awesome. You've got the massive open arenas, the destruction, the over-the-top movesets, the unbalanced characters. It's just a really good time. Is it absolutely perfect? No, I think there's some things where they cut some corners, but still, people have been wanting a game like this for a while, and it's really good that we just finally got one. Next, over at number 26, we're trying to shake it up, keep things a little bit interesting, maybe show you something different. This is Withering Rooms. This is a 2.5D horror game set in like this haunted, spooky Victorian style mansion that is procedurally generated. It essentially changes every night, so you're constantly kept on your toes. This game has some pretty cool concepts, and of course it's an indie, it can only do so much, but I still think they nailed a lot of it. If you like these types of horror vibes, if you like a little survival horror, or if you're like me, you just kind of like that 2.5D perspective, check this one out. Next, over at number 25, of course, we have Dragon's Dogma 2. Capcom finally brought it back, and what they did was give us more Dragon's Dogma. They knew what they were doing here. They didn't try and overhaul it, change Dragon's Dogma into something it wasn't. They just gave us more pawns, a compelling world, cool monsters, creatures, towns, all that. Dragon's Dogma 2 is probably one of the best RPGs of the year. There's a couple more we're going to talk about, but the fact that it's a contender is worthy of mentioning nonetheless. Next, over at number 24, we have Nine Souls. We've been talking about this one a lot on the channel because it really took us by storm. What looks like a game that might be like, a Hollow Knight type of thing, it really goes a lot further than that. This is kind of like 2D side-scrolling Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. That's really all the pitch you need here, but there's a great story, music, a cool art style. Nine Souls really has everything. Next, over at number 23, we have Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is another 2D game. Yes, I know we've been hitting a lot of these, but they finally figured out how to make Prince of Persia awesome again. Yes, it's not a fully 3D Prince adventure, but it takes the game back to the series' roots, the old classic 2D style, but like here, very Metroidvania. You're running, you're jumping, you're dodging traps, you're using time powers, you're fighting enemies. It's surprisingly challenging, and it is just a damn good time. Now, next, over at number 22, we have Helldivers 2. This multiplayer third-person co-op shooter is absolutely awesome, man. Heavily inspired by, of course, things like Starship Troopers. It still manages to feel like a really unique experience. It is great with friends, it's great alone, and I know there's been a lot of community discussion about balancing and changes and updates and stuff like that, but just bar for bar, boiling it down to its basics, Helldivers 2 is awesome. This is like a multiplayer live service game actually done right. Next over at number 21, we have Call of Duty Black Ops 6. This seems to be a pretty big one that's gotten a lot of people back in, both casual players and hardcore players. It's got a really, really good campaign that I thoroughly enjoyed. It had a lot of creative, action-packed moments, and multiplayer that seemingly just has people hooked and playing and getting pretty sweaty again. I know at this point we're all pretty cynical to the yearly Call of Duty release thing, but this year just seems to have been a good one. Next over at number 20, we have Marvel Rivals. If you were an Overwatch person and maybe you fell off Overwatch and maybe you can at least tolerate some Marvel comic book superheroes, then Marvel Rivals is absolutely awesome. They really nailed that Overwatch style feel and gameplay, but in third person with superhero characters that have over-the-top powers. So far, people have been really, really enjoying this. It's free to play, so it has all the trappings, the battle pass, stuff like that, but on its own, the core gameplay is simple, but pretty accessible and fun, and there is a crap ton of characters here. They are jamming this thing with characters, so it's really been kind of fun to dive in and figure out who your favorite hero is and how they work in the context of other characters and the mission objective. Marvel Rivals really just is a damn good simple time. Next over at number 19, we have Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Now, I know this is a controversial one, a lot of talk with it before it released, and ultimately it released, and for us here, it's okay. You know, it's definitely not as bad as I think people were expecting it to be, but does it move the needle for Dragon Age or BioWare? I don't know for sure. I'm also not a hardcore Dragon Age fan. It certainly has some flaws, but if you were looking for another RPG to jump into, create your own character, and go into a world, this is an option for 2024. Next over at number 18, we have an underrated game, Kill Knight. It's very simple, but it's just like a super sweaty, crazy isometric shooter. It's very, very arcadey, it's action heavy, it's gory, and it's a damn good time. If any of those words I said pique your interest, at least look up a YouTube video of this one, consider checking it out, because Kill Knight is pretty damn awesome. Next over at number 17, we have the Silent Hill 2 remake. I was skeptical. The original Silent Hill 2 is just such a special, unique game. I couldn't imagine anybody remaking it and actually doing a good job, but the folks at Bloober Team did. This is a really good adventure and just a good representation of why some of us older gamers love the original. And thankfully, it didn't really cut any corners. It didn't miss the point. It got it. They essentially, to use the overused phrase, they understood the assignment. Now, next over at number 16, we have Unicorn Overlord. If you're looking for a tactical RPG, maybe if you're into something like a Fire Emblem, but you've been hungry for more of that, try Unicorn Overlord because it's Atlas, so it's got a bit of a different flavor to it. They know how to make games at this point. The gameplay is really, really good and addictive, and it makes it replayable. What more can you want? Now, next over at number 15, we have Stellar Blade. This action combat adventure is really, really cool. And that sounds pretty simple, pretty silly, but that's probably the best thing I could say about it. It's just really over the top. It's got good boss battles, fun combat, not the most interesting story or characters, but it looks nice. But the most important thing is that it's just good old video game fun. It is just a fun combat adventure to play through. And sometimes that's just what the doctor ordered, man. Now, next over at number 14, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is a big one, probably one of the biggest ones of the year. It's also a massive game, much bigger than Final Fantasy VII Remake. Rebirth really blows things out of the water here with more to do, continuing the adventure, showing you more of the world of Final Fantasy VII, and it absolutely succeeds. Next over at number 13, we have Persona 3 Reload. This is a great reason, a great excuse to either replay the original incredible Persona 3 or jump in for the first time. This re-release is absolutely fantastic, and this game is a legend for a reason. Next over at number 12, we have Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. This is another one, I'm going to use the phrase again, just a good old-fashioned video game. A fun, incredible, over-the-top, action-packed, silly, third-person shooter single-player campaign, and some great co-op multiplayer. The multiplayer has like all these different classes and stuff, customization for your Space Marine. It's just really cool. You don't really need to know too much about Warhammer to jump into this. It's kind of served as a gateway drug for some people to get into Warhammer, and I think that just shows how good it is. Next, over at number 11, we have Hi-Fi Rush. What last year was an Xbox and PC exclusive has now released on PlayStation. And it's damn good. You should play it. I know it probably hasn't hit a lot of like top best, PS5 games of 2024 lists, but we totally think it deserves the recognition. Hi-Fi Rush is still awesome. Next, over at number 10, Empire of the Ants. Yes, the Ant game. They were working on this one for a while, and it was kind of joked around as like the Ant game. You play as an ant. It's a whole weird adventure, and they actually nail the sense of scale and size, and it's really cool. It just makes good on its potential. Also, there's no other game like this on the list. It's totally unique, and it's pretty good on PlayStation. Next, over at number 9, we have Pacific Drive, a kind of survival sci-fi driving game. Essentially, think of something like Stalker, but you have a vehicle. This vehicle is very susceptible to the elements, but it also can be your main tool for survival. You upgrade it to protect you and also stay safe against these scientific anomalies out in the environment. It's a really satisfying loop of getting the scientific components and putting everything together to go from a crappy old jalopy to a beefed out Ghostbusters science machine mobile. Like I said with a couple of games on this list, but definitely with this one, it is a really unique game and unlike anything else you'll play this year. Next, over at number 8, we have another unique game with Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. Capcom put out this smaller style game that seems on the surface like a combat action game thing, but it's actually a pretty in-depth and really compelling and different tower defense game, all based around Japanese myth. It's just a really, really well-made quality game, fun to play through, a good amount of challenge. Kunitsugami is great. Now, next, over at number 7, Animal Well. The indie darling of the year is absolutely incredible. It is a vibes-based game. Yes, from the lo-fi atmosphere, the chill music, great visual effects, the fact that there's no swords or guns in it, it's really exploration-based, but also the incredible puzzles and just really, really gorgeous environments and hidden little secrets, making this game just like a really solid playthrough, like a solid video game meal, you know what I mean? And next at number 6 is Tekken 8. Tekken 8 released at the very beginning of 2024, January 6th, believe it or not, and this game has had legs to last the entire year. Whether it's smart updates, great character additions, it doesn't matter. The reason why it's stuck around is because it's just a damn good, solid Tekken, and a really damn good, solid fighting game. If you're a fighting game person and you haven't checked this one out from 2024, you should now. Next, over at number 5, we have Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. This feels like a big turn of the page for the Like a Dragon series, fully leaning into this new protagonist, new gameplay style, and really shaking things up with an incredible new setting and just tons and tons of over-the-top wild gameplay scenarios. The amount of activities and zany things you do in this game is so much fun, but thankfully, it's still a Yakuza game at its heart, and with that, it just has a lot of charm, good storytelling, great characters you fall in love with. This studio has the formula figured out by now, but thankfully, Infinite Wealth still manages to feel really fresh. Next, down at number 4, we have Metaphor ReFantasio. The people behind a lot of the Persona games have come together here and created something entirely new, a new adventure in a new kind of medieval fantasy world, and they nailed it. It's another great Atlas RPG that feels distinctly like those games, but tries new and interesting things, not only in gameplay concepts, but also in story, presentation, characters, and just the questions this story asks, the type of topics it tries to handle. It's a lengthy JRPG to get sucked into, so if you're looking for one of those, look no further. Next, over at number 3, Banishers Ghosts of New Eden. You know, an underrated game from this year. Flawed, certainly, yes, but a kind of adventure game with God of War style combat set in a kind of 1600s ghostly colonial adventure world. The real thing with this game is the story. Essentially, you, a ghost hunter or a banisher, going around solving mysteries. You're going around figuring out why people died, why their ghosts haven't passed on to the afterlife, and making the real actual good RPG decisions of whether or not to send them off to the afterlife, to finish up their unfinished business, stuff like that. It's really, really creative. The concept and everything here is very unique. I haven't really seen it in a game before. Again, it's flawed. The combat might not be for everybody, but it's just a really good entry here. If you like dialogue, decision-making, story, RPG stuff, look no further here. Now down at number 2, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. If you were looking for more Elden Ring in 2024, you got it with Erdtree. This is a massive expansion, lengthy, compelling, a lot of new things to do, a lot of new gear, but also a great new world, a beautiful world filled with tons of challenging bosses. There is a lot to this DLC from Software at this point. Like they know what they're doing, and they do a really good job with DLCs, and Erdtree just continues that streak. And down at number 1, one of the big PS5 exclusives of the year was Astro Bot, a platformer in 2024. Just a regular old school style fun jumping platformer game, something we don't get very often, but here what we have is just really high quality production value, great level design, great gameplay feel, incredible music, and on top of that, be honest, like a whole bunch of PlayStation nostalgia. The amount of classic references and homages here they cram in here is really nothing short of incredible, and kind of serves as like a little gaming history book here, just one that is a platformer you play through. It's just a great game, especially if you love platformers. But we do have some bonus games, of course. We had to make this list super long because there's too much to talk about. So we have Still Wakes the Deep for horror fans, as well as A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead, surprisingly good. Slitterhead, if you're looking for something flawed, but very weird and strange and experimental. And of course, a great remaster in Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2.